For a lot of mercs, their kit is an ever-evolving, constantly changing process. Mine's pretty much been the same for 2 or 3 years now, or however long it's been, and it was time for a change. So while I was waiting for tools and parts to finish a few of the other projects that I have in process at the moment, and working on my son's kit for DragonCon this year, I wanted to try out a couple of things. I haven't really been happy with the boot plates, the shin plates, and the knees on my current Mando kit, and I'm looking to step up to something a little more armored looking. So I decided that while I was playing with ideas, I would create a set of schnees, shin and knees, for my kit. The reason I chose for my kit, not for my son's kit, was because, well, I'm here and he's not. So I can play with ideas a lot more freely.
And I started this one the same way you start most of them, templating. Piece of poster board, put it up to my knee, and kind of drew some reference marks. Squared everything up with a T-square, just so that I had something to work off of. And then, yeah, I need to get a new cutter blade. Doubled it over, cut it out, and then stuck it on my knee to test it. Sorry for the bald head in the way. And then did the same thing with the shins now that I had the knee done as a reference point. Notched out the area at the top of my foot and rounded the corners a little bit. The body doesn't like sharp objects, and especially sharp metal objects, so I try and round and or bevel the corners wherever I can. Trace the template out onto a piece of 14 gauge aluminum, and then using the press brake, I cut the straight edges and then used the bandsaw to cut out the notches. A couple of slow steps with the 3-in-1 slip rollers to get the curve, and then a couple of test fits in between. It was during this test fit that I realized that the far less bulky boots that I normally am planning on wearing with this kit going to look funny with the great big thick ankles on the schnees. But I'll deal with that down the road. Templated the knee out, took it to the 3-in-1, cut the corners out, and then cut the notches out on the bandsaw the same way I did with the shins. And back to the slip rolls to roll them into a half circle.
So I've got them notched here for boot plates. Eventually I'm going to back all of the joints with leather and leather straps to hold everything together and keep everything nice and supple so they change. Both of them are the same way. They're actually fairly lightweight. I dished the sides of the shins. They're still rough. I'm going to clean those up. And the knees. To give them a little bit more of a slender form fitting. I'm too small to try and go for the great big bulky Mando look. So I was looking for something a little bit more armored but sleek. Something a little bit more stylish than just the cones. When I originally put these things together and they were just round, I didn't really care for the look as much. So I tried dishing the sides to see if I can't smooth them out. I'm going to do some things to the shins to beef them up a little bit more, but we'll see how that comes out down the road.
So I stuck them back on and marked the place where my calf muscle meets the back of my leg. And kind of used that as a reference point and dished from that area down on both sides. And then I put the knee piece on and did the same thing for the area on the inside of the kneecap. I've got skinny little kneecaps, so I didn't need great big, thick, bulky things. Like I said, I'm looking for something a little less bulk and more elegant. But once I was comfortable that the template that I had would work, I traced the second shin out onto the aluminum, took it to 3-in-1, cut it down, and then used the original one to compare both ends to make sure that I had not managed to mess up my settings on the 3-in-1 slip roll. A few little minor adjustments here and there, and I had them both pretty close to the same. Then took a piece of paper and copied the arc that I had made for dishing on the sides at the bottom, doubled that over and traced it out on both of the shins on both of the sides, then did the same thing for the knees. Now, the area that I'm dishing on the knees is not identical from side to side, but there's an inside and outside. So when I cut the paper out, I labeled them so that I could dish them appropriately. Then traced out the other knee, marked a center line for a reference point, and cut the piece out. Back to the slip roller for its form, and then use the other knee again to compare, just to make sure that they were as close to identical as possible. Then use the templates to trace out where I was going to be dishing, and while I was here, I went ahead and drilled the sides on one of the pieces just to give it a test fit to make sure that before I got too much further, these were actually going to function. Marked a few more reference lines, drilled through the shins, and attached temporarily with a couple of rivets. I don't know how I'm going to attach these things permanently. Probably not going to be rivets, but it's hard to tell. And a reasonably successful function and test fit, and it's dishing time. Tried a couple of different techniques to get these things dished, and what I discovered eventually was that a brake disc clamped to a brake drum that I used for my seat actually proved to be a pretty good technique. It was sturdy enough and hard enough, but had a nice enough round curve that I could use it as a dolly. Occasionally using the channel on my welding table as a straight edge, I was able to get these things dished pretty close to where I wanted them and then bent more to shape. And clearance the top corners of the shins a little bit just to give them a little bit more room to flex and move. Then attach the plates together with a couple of clecos for test fitting and movement testings. Then use the dolly to hammer down the top just to, again, give it a little bit more clearance.
So now that I've got them mostly rough formed, today I'm going to work on the boot plates and the covers and start clamshelling the back so that it comes up and covers the backside of my calves. I haven't decided exactly how far and how high and how far down the calf cover is going to go, but probably the vast majority of my calf. My hope is going to be that I can attach this all with leather strapping and or Velcro or something like that, fasten it to my calves, and then use the clamshell to cover the straps so I don't have to worry about whether or not they match the kit. We'll see how that works out. See you next week.